everyone, and welcome to the latest of our FrenchEntrée webinars. My name is Zoe Smith. I'm digital editor of FrenchEntrée, and in today's webinar, we're going to be looking at how to get a French visa in 2025 with our expert, Fabien Pelissier from Fab Expat. For those of you that aren't familiar with FrenchEntrée, we are part of the France Media Group, and we've been a leading resource for French property buyers and expats for more than 20 years now. We provide a host of free resources, including weekly newsletters and French property listings over at FrenchEntrée.com, as well as putting out regular video content on our YouTube channel. We also have the FrenchEntrée members service, which provides extra help and guidance during your journey of buying property and moving to France. We have 2 levels of membership: Essential, which allows access to our exclusive members content and everything you need for your buying journey, and our Plus membership, in which you'll have personal guidance from our property and relocation advisors. And if you want to find out more or you're ready to become a member, then you can do that at FrenchEntrée.com/members. Let's get started with today's webinar, where we're focusing on French visas. We're aiming for a runtime of around an hour today, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Thank you to everyone who sent in your questions in advance. There were lots of them. I have a big list of them here. And you can also put your questions live in the Q&A box on your screen at any time throughout. Okay, let's meet our expert today, Fab. We have here. Hi, Fab. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Zoe. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Don't know where you are, but that's the spirit.
Now, I'm sure many of you have probably seen Fab before. He's done quite a few of these webinars with us now. But for those that don't know you, Fab, could you just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about Fab Expat and what you do?
Sure. Well, as you can tell, I'm French, hopefully. I'm Fabien, but I go by Fab because it's easy to pronounce in English, let's be honest. I'm the founder and managing director of both Fab French Insurance and Fab Expat. So we help indeed with the whole relocation process, so the move to France. And I like to say from visas to insurance to even like flying pets on private charter jets if necessary. So, although not often, I'll be honest.
Brilliant. Okay, well, let's start with a quick update. So we're focusing on visas today. What's the situation for foreigners looking to apply for a French visa in 2025? Is there anything that's changed, anything new?
Oh, there's always something new. Well, it depends on where you're from, because France subcontracts visas, usually, the visa processing to, private contractors. In the UK, that contractor is TLS Contact, which is a French provider, a French company. In the US, it used to be VFS. Something apparently was going on. So out of the blue, they've changed this provider to TLS. So that's our current news in the industry. So in the US, they're going to have the same provider as, you have in the UK, Zoe. So TLS, that's one of the new news. Also, in July this year, a new set of regulations, which we've covered last year, who was all the rage, is getting enforced, which is basically the French language tests. But I want to emphasize on some residence permits, so not on visas, and only on multi-use permits, and only on certain types of permits. So usually, most expats from English-speaking countries, unless they're married to a French citizen and unless it's been a recent marriage, they're not impacted.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay, well, we'll get straight into the questions. But before we do, actually, let's just cover a few basics just to make sure we're all on the same page if anyone's new here. So can you talk us through a few of the most common visa types and the eligibility criteria that go along with those visas?
Well, yes, sure. They're basically, so first, there's short-term and long-term visas. So there's basically resident type of visas and non-resident type of visas. But actually, there's just one resident type of visa. There is the 1-year VLSTS, so the 12+ month VLSTS visa, which is a resident type. And then it comes in subcategories, and we'll talk about those. And then there are non-resident types. So there is a 12-month non-resident type. They call it the 6 to 12-month visa. Mm-hmm. And there is a 6-month visa, but that's like I'd say a flat rate 6 month, it's like 6 months in a row. Unfortunately, it's not 6 months a year. If you want 6 months a year, you have to go for the 6 to 12 month. Mm-hmm. So the difference between resident and non-resident type of visa is that the resident type of visa, does imply you'd be filing taxes in France. You might be tax exempt, but you do need to file your taxes. But it also makes you eligible for getting into French healthcare, which, by the way, is social security. So in the UK, that's the same word you'd use, but in the US, that's not that's a false friend. Um, and well, another perk as well of the resident type of visa is that it is, well, they call it renewable. I hate this word because I think it's confusing as hell. You don't renew a visa, you kind of convert it, or more like, well, you don't do anything and then you apply for a resident permit. But you have the right to apply for a resident permit after your visa, after your 1 year visa from France. You have to have a renewable type of visa, so a resident type of visa. Sorry if I'm bombarding you with those information.
Yeah. Well, and actually, it's a good point, because that was the next thing I wanted to ask was, let's give people an overview just of that process of moving to France. So we know it starts with a visa, some kind of visa, probably a 12-month one. And then what happens? You just mentioned renewing it for a carte de séjour. Is that correct?
Yeah, so say, I mean, it used to be that, and I used to like that because there was the residency permit, and there's one word in English, residence permit. There's one word in French, carte de séjour. But so apparently that was too simple for the French authorities, not confusing enough to be completely French. So we've decided to come up with a lot of different words to describe the same thing. So there is the carte de séjour, it still exists, but now it's like the carte de séjour, the 1 year. And then for the multi-years ones, usually they would say there's the carte de séjour pluriannuel, multi-years carte de séjour. Or if it's a longer term one, they call it a carte de résident. So you could have two options there, again, confusion was important to us. And then there is the 10 years one, the permanent one, with the carte de résident permanent. So I prefer to stick with the residency permit word in English because they're all the same. It's just the duration that changes. Yeah.
Okay. So normally what would happen is you'd come in on a visa, and then you'd probably apply for a 1 year carte de séjour. And then after that, you might apply.
That's it. So, well,
yeah. Okay.
There are some exceptions, but like the vast majority of the time, all of you will have to apply for a 1 year visa. Again, 12 plus months. That's the option that you'll need to check. Make sure you check this one. And then from France, usually when the visa is like 4 months from expiring, 4 to 3 is what I would advise. Then you can, again, from within France, it's an online process. You start online, but then you'll need to physically go to an in-person interview at la préfecture, so a governmental body in France, and your local prefecture you'd go to. And that's where you apply indeed for that residency permit from France, which you'll then need to renew X amount of times until they're comfortable enough that your situation is actually stable enough. And then they give you a multi-years permit that typically takes 3 to 5 years to get a 5 years permit, which is often a one-off leading into a 10 years permit. All of that is a bit discretionary. It could be much faster, could be slower, but on average, it's the kind of process. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, that gives us a good overview. And yeah, I think that's worth saying. Probably everything that we say today, there's probably always going to be some exceptions to it, right? That's just how it goes.
Yeah, like I was saying, the 12 plus month, because I'm seeing a question from Rod in that the non-resident type. The 12 plus month is the resident type. If you apply for the 6 to 12 month, it's basically the same thing. You can be there all year long, or just 3 months or 6 months a year. The main difference, again, is not being able to renew the visa from France and not being able to apply into French healthcare. But potentially, if you do not spend more than 183 days in France per calendar year, then you could avoid being a tax resident for second homeowners or long-term travelers. The only problem, well, it's not a problem, it might be by design for you, but the only thing to have in mind is that in that particular case, the word renewing the visa is completely relevant, because then if you want to renew that, so your visa year after year, you need to go back to your home country and reapply, okay? There's no applying in France or renewing that from France. It needs to be done from abroad, well, considering I'm French.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. Right, I know there's quite a lot of live questions already coming in, but I'm just going to start with a few that people have sent in advance, and then we'll come back to the live questions. So I have Dominic, who says, I'm currently applying for Italian citizenship. I'm looking to buy a house in France and move to France. What are the best steps to take to stay in France while I'm waiting for my Italian passport to come through? Now, he doesn't say what nationality he is, but
yeah, well, considering he's non-European, yeah, okay. Yes, exactly, Zoe. Let's make the assumption. So, considering he's non-European, so it needs to be a regular visa. The fact that he is currently doing an EU citizenship application doesn't change anything.
Okay.
And when, well, if you move to France after being Italian, obviously, then you can move to France without doing anything apart from manually applying into French healthcare. And if he gets the citizenship from France, he will not need to renew the visa. So that exempts him from having to apply for a resident permit in 1 year time or things like that. But you will still need to apply for a visa as anyone else that's non-European.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. And I suppose probably a good idea, Dominic, as well, to check how long you're going to be waiting for your Italian passport. Because I know the process in France can be very long. Maybe it's also a long time in Italy. I don't know.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah. So Rachel says, we've owned a second home in France since 2008. My husband holds an Irish passport as well as a UK passport. I just hold a UK passport. This is quite a classic question. Am I able to stay longer than the 90 days, provided I'm with my husband?
It's a yes and no kind of answer. So first, the Irish husband, first, when you have more than one nationalities, and one of those is European, then you can go to France without anything, okay? Obviously, then you don't disclose the British passport, which is not lying, it's just you use the European one.
Yeah, you go on the...
So then this is the case here, if you're the spouse of an EU citizen, and it needs to be the spouse. If it's the partner, it doesn't work, okay? You need to be the spouse of an EU citizen. If you're the spouse of an EU citizen, then you can indeed come to France without a visa. That's great. However, you will need to apply for that resident permit. So that's one of the exemptions I mentioned. You will need to, instead of waiting for 1 year, you will need to apply for the residence permit within 90 days to allow you to stay for more than 90 days. Although it's not illegal for you to have overstayed, it's just that if you do not have the residence permit and have been for more than 90 days in France and then fly abroad or whatever, and then try to come back in, they may deny you re-entry because you would have exceeded the allowance and you do not have a resident permit. So you're still bound by the 90 days rule, although it's legally acceptable to be in France. Again, considering you have started the residence application within 90 days though.
And so what happens because it's not actually clear from this whether they're actually intending to move to France or whether they're just looking to visit their second home?
Yeah, if they just want to visit, no, it's still bound by the 90 days.
They can't get that carte de séjour. That is declaring that you're a resident in France.
Yes.
Right? Okay. I want to make that clear because I think quite a few people get a bit confused on that one.
Exactly.
Okay, we've got Brian now. He's one of our FrenchEntrée members, and he's got 2 questions. So his first one is, he's looking to get married or paxed with his French partner, and he wants to know if there's a difference between marriage or pax in terms of long-term residency applications. So let's answer that one first.
Yes. Well, actually, it's great you asked the question right after the EU one, the spouse of EU citizen, because I forgot to specify, obviously, again, this is France. So we have a specific rule for the spouse of a French citizen, which is not the same as being the spouse of an EU citizen. So yes, it does. So first, marriage is going to bring some perks. Anything else than marriage, not necessarily. Most often that does not bring any perk. I mean, at least not immediately. It might be because you can piggyback on healthcare and stuff like this. But in terms of visas, it's only if you're married, okay, that you may see some changes. Okay. So depending on how recent is the marriage, so less than 5 years. Well, actually, if you've been married for more than 5 years with a French citizen, you can apply for citizenship through marriage. Citizenship through marriage. So that is a great perk. That's not the case here. Then it could still apply for then a visa. Then in that's particular, should that be an EU spouse? That would be different. But with the French spouse, you can apply for a visa as the spouse of a French citizen, which is easy to get and then will be leading into a multi-year residency permit much faster. The catch is as it does come with a French test for the resident permit, not the visa. Okay. But I want to reassure you, if you fail the test, then they'll stick you on the 1-year visa until you can succeed, or until you've been married for 5 years, and then you can apply for citizenship through marriage, basically.
Okay, great. Right, Brian's other question was, do you know how long it takes to get a visa appointment at TLS in the UK at the moment?
Yeah, within a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Right. Okay. It's quite
considering. I mean, there's a lot of variables. But it also depends on the visa center. It depends if you're talking London, Manchester, Edinburgh. Edinburgh is very quiet usually. Manchester as well. Although I always recommend London, because even if sometimes you may have to wait a couple of extra days, the French consulate is in London. So that's where the turnover is going to be faster, because
A good tip.
they literally next door. Whereas if it's Manchester or Edinburgh, which I don't pronounce right, I know, but they need to ship it back to London, and it comes back to the visa center. So it adds delays. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So when would you recommend that somebody makes that application? If, for example, you want to travel to France in 2 months' time or 3 months' time, at what point should you make
the sooner the better. Ideally, you want to start the process when you're within 2 to 3 months prior to the intended arrival date. And at the very latest, I would say 6 to 8 weeks. 6 weeks for me would be, I mean, technically you could do as late as 4 weeks before, but honestly, you'd be running like a headless chicken. So 6 to 8 weeks is ideal. Well, it's late, but I mean, if you're late but want to move faster, giving yourself 6 to 8 weeks is ideal. Up to 3 months is even better. More than 3 months, you can start a lot of things, but you won't be able to book the in-person appointment at the visa center.
Okay, that makes sense. Right. Okay, let's go to some of the live questions. God, we've already got 27. Look at that. Okay, I'll start at the beginning. So Lynn says, my husband has an EU passport and I'm British. I'm waiting for my carte de séjour and want to be able to set up a micro-entrepreneur. Once I have my carte de séjour, what's the next stage? Getting a social security.
Brilliant. Yes. That's a very good question. I didn't mention this either, but or is it neither? I never know. So when you're the spouse of an EU citizen, you also are entitled to work in France. That means you can get a job, you can set up a business. So makes it much easier. Same for the spouse of a French citizen, by the way. So the next step is, well, you just move to France. Again, you apply for that resident permit. You do need to apply for the resident permit. The resident permit is also the work allowance, if you like, okay, the work authorization. Okay. So you do need to apply for this. Once you receive the resident permit, then you're allowed to work. Okay.
So then when you set up the business and
well, exactly. Well, depending on when, because you also have to wait for 90 days to apply for French healthcare. So depending on when you would have applied for that residence permit, you know, maybe you can start applying for the French healthcare as soon as you get the permit, or maybe you have to wait because you have to wait that respect that 90 days waiting period. Knowing that with everything, there is always a catch and there is always exceptions. Setting up a business is one of those. So as soon as you get the resident permit and you set up a business, it makes you instantly eligible for French healthcare as well. So it voids the 90 days waiting.
Yeah. Well, it's a good one to talk about, actually, because I think people don't always realize the timeline of in France, you know, a lot of things you have to have one thing before you have another, apply for another thing. And sometimes, like you say, one thing can make something else speed up.
Well, basically, it's very simple. If you're employed, I mean, if you're employed, you're part of French healthcare the minute your wage starts, basically.
Right.
You know? If you're self-employed, same. Well, you can start applying the minute you register the business. Okay, so but it might take a few weeks, months, then it depends. But you know, but you may, basically you could fast track into this. You could void the 90 days waiting period, basically. And for everyone else, you have to respect the 90 days waiting period.
Okay.
To apply into healthcare. Okay, we're just considering.
Yeah. Okay, right. Let's have another one. Paula says, is it difficult to go back to a visitor's visa after having a carte de séjour? We might be spending 6 months in the US instead of France due to financial account issues in the US. Right. That's
well, no, usually, I mean, if you currently have a carte de séjour, you usually renew it. Whatever you've been around for long or not, you usually renew it. You don't if there's been a break. Okay, or if they don't want to renew it.
Right. Okay.
And in that case, no, it's not difficult to go back to a visa. It's just you have to go back to your own country.
Just reapply again. Okay.
And if you don't want to extend your carte de séjour because you've been much more than 6 months away, then you can simply reapply from your own country and restart the process. It usually have no impact. Actually, if anything, it might be more of a positive impact. But so yeah.
Yeah, because you've already got that history in France, I guess. Okay,
but theoretically, it doesn't change anything. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Right, Christine says, I already own a house in France. I would like to stay for longer than the 90 days out of every 180 days. How can I achieve this? I think you mentioned this earlier. Is this the 6-month visa?
Well, well, it depends on what's the plan. You know, if the plan is just to be like a long-term tourist and enjoy the property for longer periods, or if the plan is to move to France. If the plan is to move to France, we've mentioned this, you know, it's a 12+ month visa. If the plan is to well, enjoy your second home for a longer period of time, then it could be the flat 6-month visa again. Not the most convenient, but at least could extend. That's one way. The good news with the 6-month visa, because of, well, she mentioned Brexit, the B word, so she's probably from the UK. The good thing with the 6-month visa is you can use the GEIC from the UK instead of private medical insurance, which is one of those requirements, you know, for visas. And well, basically the GEIC is for free then. So that's much cheaper to
so
get a
that could
visa
be a
with.
big plus.
Oh yes, it's usually a very important part of that process. Otherwise, you need to apply for the 6 to 12 month. 6 to 12 months, for those who can afford it, obviously is better because it gives you more flexibility. But by definition, is more expensive because you need to have a 1-year private medical insurance in place. You need to have, well, obviously to pay for the whole visa. The requirements are matching a 1-year requirement and not 6 months. So well, it's mostly because of the insurance that is more expensive.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, Dewey says, hello, friends. Hello, Dewey. I lived and worked in France from 1990 through to 2003 when I had to return to the UK. My question is, I have a small French pension and a works pension for my employers. Will this help in getting a visa or a carte de résident? I have a French national insurance number as well. So I'm assuming he is wanting to come back to France.
Yeah. So unfortunately, having a French history doesn't make a difference. Theoretically, those are what this is those of these unwritten rules. Quite difficult to pronounce. Well, theoretically, no difference. Practically, yes. The first one is you have pension, social security number already and stuff. Everything will be much easier admin-wise. Everything should be faster. Also, you already have income and or savings. We didn't mention this, but you know, to get a 1-year visa, I say that all the time. I love this analogy of saying, you know, you need to meet those 3 pillars, okay, which is proof of income, proof of address, proof of medical coverage. So proof of income, well, having a French pension and stuff like this will help build that pillar. And the proof of income they require is that you meet the French minimum wage, which is 1,400 euros and 26, well, 1,426 euros net a month. Let's round that up to 1,400. Or could be 12 times this amount in savings. Okay, that's easy to meet. Then the second pillar, you have a French property or a French rental contract, or you know people in France who are happy having you and write a letter that you can use their address. It's all visa compliant. That meets the second pillar. Could be the trickiest if you're from the US because obviously it's harder to secure an accommodation when you're so far away. We do have people who can help, by the way, for all of that, but you know, it's and the third pillar is insurance. So insurance is interesting because I think from what I've heard, you know, the change from VFS to TLS, it might be partly due to insurance because they've advertised massively for non-compliant policies, and the French government might not have been super happy with that. So insurance is very simple. Theoretically, they want a policy that doesn't have any excess or any deductible. They want a policy that covers up to 30,000 euros per person in and outpatient benefits, but very, very important, it needs to be private medical insurance, not travel insurance. The difference is very easy to spot on if you're not an insurance expert, which hopefully you're not, because there's more interesting things to do. But it's to use your UK or US to use the French address. If you have to use the UK or the US address, for example, or wherever you're from, well, it means it's travel insurance because it means that policy will not cover you as a resident in France, which you will become from day one once the visa gets started.
Okay, right. So that's a good overview of the things that you will need. Right, let's have one more live question, then I'm going to go back to a few of the ones that people have sent in. Sarah, actually, I can answer this one. Sarah, if you've got a withdrawal agreement, carte de séjour, you are not subject to a French test. I know this because I'm also on one.
No, yes, no.
That we're exempt from that, and that doesn't change. Okay, Steve says, I intend to be resident in France using my Irish passport, but my wife has a UK passport. This might be similar to one we've already answered. What does she need to work in France, either for part-time work or full-time seasonal work?
Yeah, like we said.
Well, I think this is a good thing to just clarify. So if she comes with him and then applies for her carte de séjour through her Irish husband, on that carte de séjour, is she able to work?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, I should
That
not
is different
show that
from-
on camera. But the carte de séjour, is like a driver license card. I was about to show mine, but it's like a driver license card, and on it is written whatever you can work or not.
Yeah, that's true.
If you apply, so that's why there's no category, not like visas where you have retirees. Basically, it's like called visitor visa, which is for retirees, non-workers. You have business type of visa, profession libérale, entrepreneur, etc., etc. Unlike those, you do file for a residency permit as something, a retiree, a worker, or a self-employed. It won't be written on your card, but it's going to be written whatever you're allowed to work or not.
Okay, so that's a good one. If you're unsure, go check your card.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. I'm going to go to a few of the questions people have sent in. So I have Dale, who says, I moved to France permanently in June of last year. I'm having difficulty applying for a carte vitale, so that's the healthcare card in France, because I can't show proof of address. I rent a flat in the Brittany region, but I pay my landlord in cash per her request, and utilities are in her name. Is there a way around this?
Well, unfortunately, it's going to be a painfully honest answer. The situation is not legit. So they want proof of something stable. It's not okay to pay cash. It's not okay to not have evidence. Like you should have something called a quittance de loyer, which is kind of invoice as proof of your payment. I suppose if you pay cash, then you do not have such a thing. If it's your property, every renter is supposed to have either copy of utility bills or a sub invoice from the the landlord invoicing them for a fraction of the cost or whatever. But you're supposed to have some sort of evidence. Lack of evidence means that you're doing that a bit in the gray area. So it's not legit. And as it's not legit, obviously you won't be able to see any kind of process in France. See through, sorry.
Yeah, and I imagine this will probably affect him in many other ways. So that's probably something, unfortunately, Dale, that you might want to look into changing.
Yeah, or just ask the landlord to provide you with quittance de loyer, which is invoices for your rent. If you can get that, that would change things massively.
Okay, great. Okay, Kelly says, I'm a naturalized US citizen without the ability to get a long form birth certificate. I have a US naturalization certificate with an apostle. Can I get a VLSTS visitor visa for France without a long form birth certificate?
Well, you love this one. Yeah, you don't even need the birth certificate for a visitor visa.
Okay, great.
Just the passport will do it.
Well, Kelly will be very happy to hear that. Okay, Richard says, my wife and I want to retire to the Dordogne late next year. Very nice. We'll be living off a private pension until we reach retirement age. And we also have a substantial amount in savings to buy a French property. How much income do we need to apply for a French visa and later a carte de séjour? And does the visa application consider joint income as a couple?
Yeah,
so you already mentioned the amount before, didn't you? But what about as a couple?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, basically, again, when you're married, you can use each other's resources indifferently. And it's completely fine if all of the income and or savings are in only one of the partner's name, okay? Because by the way, every adult needs to file a separate application, but you cross-reference each other. And if you want to bulletproof your application, let's say there's only one that has all the money, all the income, then that guy or that girl can write a statement, say, okay, I'm happy with my spouse using my resources, but you don't need to do that. But if you want to bulletproof, so that's completely doable. How much do you need? So it's basically, again, minimum wage per person. Theoretically, they do apply a discount when you apply combined, but we try to meet the theoretical requirement. But if you have a lump sum, as investment or invested to buy a French property, even if you intend to spend it all, potentially, you can use that for your visa, because that's probably going to meet the requirements, which, by the way, it's either you have, so again, if that's two people, you just multiply by two. It's 1,400 net amount for one person, or 12 times the amount. So if you have that, you need zero savings, okay? It's not both. Or 12 times the amount, I'll round that up to 18,000 euros. And if you have 80,000 euros or more in savings, then you need zero income, okay? Or that could be a mix of both. But you don't need both. It's either, could be both if you're short for both, but you know, so that's very important.
Yeah. Okay, that's really
And
good.
it's completely fine if it's in GBP, US dollars, whatever. Obviously, you have to consider the exchange rate then, but you know.
Yeah. Okay, great. Right. One more question that someone sent in, and then I'll come back to the live questions because they are piling up. Right. Edward says, we have our primary residence in the US, but have a secondary home in France.
Okay.
We'd like to get, okay, this is an interesting one because I think people mistake this quite a lot. He says, we'd like to get our long stay visas and apply for a carte de séjour visitor for France. However, they don't want to move to France. They basically want to do this to avoid the 90 out of 180 day rule. And they say, we're not going to work in France. We won't use the social service system and we'll have health insurance. What's the legality on something like this?
No, well, obviously, if you exceed 183 days, it's not an immigration problem. It's a tax issue. Then you become a tax resident de facto. The visa has nothing to do with that. But so in that case, that would be a 6 to 12 month visa. So there's no, there is confusion because VLSTS, which is a 12 month or a 6 to 12 month visa, could be, well, now it's a VLST, but so the VLSTS, it means, it's a French acronym, but I'll translate in English, kind of. Visa long stay acting as a titre de séjour. The TS bit means titre de séjour. So we could say a visa is a titre de séjour as well. And by the way, we say titre de séjour or carte de séjour. The card is the card. The carte de séjour is a titre de séjour.
Confusion. Just make it more confusing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all the same. So technically, we could say it's all the same. But a visa is a page in your passport. And a carte de séjour, so card, residency card, is a physical card like your driver license. So the card you can only have if you're a taxpayer, basically, or at least a tax resident, even if you're tax exempt. Just to clarify, okay? So if you just want to exceed that, then you apply for a 6 to 12 month visa, and you just keep on renewing that every year, and as long as and often as you want.
But when you say renew that, you would mean going back to
from abroad, not from France. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a good thing to point out because I think a lot of people think that they can come and get this carte de séjour. I know Brits like to think they can do this as well. And
there's quite a few people who cheat the system. Let's be honest. You know, especially if you have a second home, you can provide utility bills, stuff like this. So, you know, might look like you live there. But eventually they'll catch up with the situation because you're not filing taxes. And so, well, you know, but I know there's a lot of people who get around the system, but just to clarify, it's not legal, it's not legit, you know. So.
Yeah, so it's not something we'd recommend, even if you had a friend or someone on Facebook that's done it. Okay, let's go back to live questions. Julian says, I'm not quite sure what he's referring to here. What impact does it have if one of you ever retired?
Well, none. Yeah, it's well, basically it's going to be then you're not going to work, and it's going to be a visitor type of visa, so non-working type.
Visitor visa. Okay.
Well, actually, impact is the visitor type of visa is the easiest to secure. So let's say it's going to make it easier.
Okay, well, then good news then. Okay, Susie says, we have titre de séjour and carte vitale through my husband's work, and we own an apartment in France. My husband is about to retire. Can we get a titre de séjour based on apartment ownership? I don't quite understand that because it says they have them already. Maybe you can clarify, Susie, what the question is there. I'm not quite sure. Okay, Paul Webb says, can you go in and out on a 6 months visa? I think that's an easy one.
Well, actually, 6 month visa and all non-resident visa, you can go in and out as often as you want. There's absolutely zero restriction. The 1 year resident visa, it's a question I'm being asked often. That's why I think it's worth answering it, even if it's not directly asked. But for the resident type of visa, same. Only obviously, well, then it's a resident time. So you're supposed to be spending most of your time in France because that's supposed to be your country of residence. That's the only limitation. But you can be in and out as often as you like, okay? As long as you spend most of your time in France and that's your country of residence.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, Dave and Sue say, what are the fees payable when you apply for residency for a long stay visa in the first year and then for subsequent years? So the fee for
not that expensive. There's well, an interview fee, I would say, that you pay, well, in the UK, in the US. So it's usually 100 euros. That might change in the US, but at the minute it's 100 euros converted into the local currency. Then there's an activation fee of 150 euro. So it's per person, sorry. Okay. So let's say total combined is like a 250 euros process. But the subcontractors may charge you some service fees, if you like. Okay.
Okay.
So and then the renewals are cheaper. It's like less than 100 euros. So it's a stamp you need to buy.
Okay, great. Right, Lynn says, husband EU passport. Her husband has an EU passport. How does he apply for carte vitale? So again, this is
So whatever you have an EU passport or not, doesn't change anything. You have to respect the one. My brother is French. Went back from Ireland, and he has to wait for 90 days until he can reapply for his social security number. You
so
don't
have
apply
to
for the carte
be in
vitale.
France
Yeah,
for 90 days, then you
yeah,
can apply.
exactly. There is a waiting period no matter the situation. Again, unless you're employed or self-employed. But
Okay.
and then you need to wait 90 days and then apply into French healthcare, which we call CPAM, CPAM. There is a form for that. Okay.
Okay. Okay, great. And then just wait a very long time and eventually they'll send it to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it depends. So temporary numbers, usually 6 to 7 months to get them. So is that 9 to 10 months total. Carte Vitale will then show up within a couple of months afterwards.
Okay, great. Okay, Fiona says, can you still apply for a financially independent visa? I'm not sure what that means. We're having a house built in France. I retired in the UK, but would like to spend more than 90 days at a time in France. We have
Okay, no, I see. Yes. I see
Oh, I see. Yeah. So they're not planning to move permanently to France, but because they're investing, they
So
would.
there's no such thing in France. There is in Spain and Italy, but not in France. So that's going to fall under the visitor visa category, which could be again 6 to 12 months if you don't intend to become a resident, or more than 12 months if you want to be a resident.
Okay. Alexi, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce your name. Says, how far ahead of the intended long stay visa can I apply from the US? Is it still 3 months or less? So yeah, is there a sort of maximum time in
there's no, you can start that 1 year earlier if you'd like.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes, and you can, by the way, you can create dozens of accounts if you like, it's just that you'll be stuck. No, nothing is real until you've booked and paid for that appointment. But you'll be stuck if you're more than 90 days away from the intended arrival date that you would have laid on the application. Because if you're more than 90 days away, they won't let you book an appointment.
Right. Okay. So it's the appointment really that has the.
So you can do everything online, start 6 months ahead if you like. It's just that you won't be able to see the whole process through unless you're within 90 days.
Okay, but that's good to know. If somebody wants to be very prepared and they want to start getting
and play around with the system. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Catherine says, I'm a dual US UK citizen. Is there a difference between applying for French citizenship with either passport? Is one path quicker? Oh, that's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a trick question. Yeah, well, I would have never considered this angle.
No,
it's not. Well, actually, we're not discriminating in France. Maybe I would change. I don't know that. I don't think so. So no, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, and I imagine you would have to declare your dual citizenship, I would imagine, on the citizenship application.
Well, I mean, yeah, well, no, you're right. It could make a difference. I mean, it doesn't in our case, but it could make a difference if one of your countries of nationality might have a conflict of interest with France or prevents dual nationals or stuff like this. But yeah, well, I don't think it's the case here. Yeah.
No. Okay. Right. MN says, as an EU passport holder, Irish, lots of Irish citizens here, surprise, surprise. Is it easier for my long-term partner to apply for a visa as we want to move long-term to France, or do we need to be married? Okay. So they're not married and they're wondering, would it be easier to get married?
So if the marriage is too recent, they may not accept the spouse of an EU citizen situation. But again, it's not a big deal, okay? You can do the visa. You can do the visa as the partner of an EU citizen. That does work. And it does make things easier, especially when applying for French healthcare, basically guaranteeing that it's going to be for free because, the EU spouse or the EU partner will apply for French healthcare, and then the spouse or the partner will then piggyback onto that. So it does make it easier, but unfortunately, if you're not married, it doesn't really make it easier for it doesn't permit to void the visa. Yeah.
I can imagine that also might make it easier because she would also be able to work on that if they were married, right?
If they were married, yes. Yeah.
Work. So otherwise she would have to apply for a visa that she could work on if she wants to work.
So, I mean, I should disclose, she did pay me, before this interview to say, yes, you should marry her. But
yeah, good one. Okay, one more live question, then I'll do a few of the other ones that people sent in. Ginny says, another Irish citizen, I'm hoping to apply for Irish citizenship by descent. Once I have, the hope is to move to France at some point. My husband and children have British passports. Someone mentioned a family visa for spouse and children. Is that something we'd have to apply for before arriving in France? Or so what's the process with children? They also do the same
yes, thing. I'm being wary of the words. So first, the husband will apply for, well, depends on the kid's age, by the way, but the husband will need to apply for the spouse of an EU citizen, and that won't be a visa, okay? That's going to be a residency permit straight away. For the kids, it depends on the age. So I'm assuming they're adults. Unfortunately, there is an option called the family reunification, but I would say that you need to have a chat with an immigration attorney. Okay, it's not as easy as it seems.
Okay, that's good advice.
Just, I mean, it's not to criticize, but just to make it painfully obvious. This is, for example, the kind of things that are used by migrants and stuff like this. That's why the French government is very wary of those applications. And they're going to be very cautious when they assess them. So you're going to need to file this very particularly to make sure it's accepted. So that's why I strongly recommend immigration lawyers for those schemes.
Okay, that's good advice.
If they're minors, there's no problem. They can follow suit, by the way.
Okay. Right, let's go to a few questions people have already sent in. So I've got Nigel who says, so you might not be able to answer this exactly, but maybe give an idea. What percentage of applicants that meet the basic required criteria have their long-term residency visa application accepted?
Oh.
I don't know that we have.
No, actually, 100%. If they meet the three pillars, that's why we call it that. If they meet the three pillars, so like you have a long-term a fixed address, you have proof of address that's compliant, you have enough funds or you have enough income or both, and then you have a compliant insurance policy in place, then 100% would be accepted. Okay. We're talking visitor visa. I mean, then we need to be specific, because if you don't have, for business type of visa, it's a business plan you'd use. So, I'm sticking on the generic situation. For visitor visa, if you meet the three pillars, it's always going to be accepted. Unless I've had one rejection once, some guy you took a selfie picture of himself on a beach, like didn't wear a shirt and all, as an ID picture he provided in the file, obviously is not going to be accepted. But I mean, we could have spotted it on, so yeah.
Okay, so as long as you meet the three pillars and you don't do anything silly, you should be
exactly.
Should get a French visa. Okay, great. Okay, Sue says, how does one qualify for the artist visa? I think she means the talent passport here. And
no, it depends. It depends. There's two.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah. There's an artist one. There's an artist one. Sorry.
Okay. I had somebody else mention the talent passport as well. So maybe just quickly.
Yeah, there's confusion because there's one which is internationally renowned passport for artists. And then there is an artist. Well, they're both, you're right, they're both talent passports, but there's the artist one and the international artist, basically.
Okay, so Sue doesn't specify if she's an internationally renowned artist, but
whatever the situation, unless you're really a superstar, just go for the artist one. And it's actually quite easy to meet, as long as you have any kind of evidence that whatever art you practice, you're doing that as a professional. So proof of income from your work or your art, invoices, I don't know, ads you might have done for theaters, whatever you've done. Again, as long as you can prove you've been doing this as a professional, and as long as you can demonstrate either you're making or you have a business plan solid enough that it's credible to prove that you're making 60% of French minimum wage, so they're actually lowering the bar here as well, then it's going to be accepted.
Okay, that's interesting. I also had Norman who mentioned the talent passport, and he says, I have a biotech startup company that I would like to transfer from the UK to France. Would the talent passport possibly be an option for him?
Yes, probably maybe not. Well, yes. So there's multiple types. More than happy to have an in-depth chat because it might
Yeah.
go a bit all over the place, but maybe not for the reasons he thinks. Basically, if you transfer a business and you invest like 30,000 euros in a French business, again, that's your money, that's your business. Okay, you're not losing that. That's one way to qualify for a talent passport, and usually much easier than trying to be seen as a talent for France, because there's also one way to be doing a job that France will consider highly skilled workers. That's why they call it. So
Okay.
there's more than one ways. But I would say in his case, it's probably going to be like the entrepreneur one. So which is, there's a regular visa entrepreneur and there is a talent passport entrepreneur. Obviously, they kept the same name because that would have been confusing. So
Yeah.
otherwise, we don't like that when it's not confusing.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, the business ones can sometimes be a bit tricky. So, as Fab said, that might be one where having a private consultation might be a really good idea. Right. I'll do one more question from the ones I've had sent in, and then we'll go to the live questions again, because they are still coming in. Okay. Joan says, I was wondering if I get a 6-month French visa, how this affects the 90-day stay within the rest of Schengen.
It doesn't.
Okay, great. Easy one.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay. Right, let's go back to these live questions. I'm going to try and pick, because we've got so many, I'm going to try and pick some that we haven't already answered. Common aspects, this is a bit individual. Oh, okay. We're both US citizens. This is Michael. Both US citizens. My wife wants to pursue a French visa. Will our common assets in the US need to be set up as individual for each of our VLSTS applications? So if they've got assets, I guess, that are in both of their name, can they both put them down on their...
Oh, yes. Yeah. If they're married, yes. Like I was saying, you can use each other's resources indifferently. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think we've answered quite a few of these about getting married.
I see one just from Lean. If married to EU passport holder for 5 years, can I apply for citizenship? No. You can only apply for French citizenship if you're married to a French citizen, obviously. Well, maybe Irish recognize that. I don't know about Irish laws, but then it depends on the countries your husband is from.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Yeah, of course, if you have spent 5 years living in France, you could apply for French citizenship
That's another
your
thing.
own accord, but not by marriage.
Which you're doing, aren't you?
I am applying for French nationality. Yes, I'm in the process. I've had my interview and I'm just waiting. It's a very long game.
No, but that says, Zoe is quite fluent in French and, she's, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Collins, right. I think we've answered those ones. Another one. God, lots and lots of Irish citizens. A lot of people asking about
the population of Ireland probably doubled after Brexit.
Probably, yeah. A lot of people asking about this, the tax situation. Is the 183 days or whatever it is this, hard and fast rule for paying tax?
Well, no, actually is not. I mean, it kind of is because it's an international regulation, but you can look at pretty much, you can scrap all tax laws in France, all laws of France, and you won't find any mention of that 183-day number. Because it's not the legal definition. The legal definition is you become a tax resident in the country where you have the most of your financial interest in, which means where are your banks? Where is your income? Where is the country you spend the most time in? So you could be spending, I don't know, 3 months in Spain, 3 months in Italy, and 3 months in Portugal, and 4 months in France. I don't know, it doesn't add up, but I mean, something like that. France is the country where you spend the most time in, and it's less than 183 days, but then in that situation, you might be considered a French tax resident anyway. So anyway, it's the other way around, okay? So usually if you exceed 183 days, it kind of make you a tax resident, but it's not. There are situations where it may not make you a tax resident.
Okay, I mean, this is something I think we should probably emphasize to people. If you do have a question about tax, get some expert advice on this. If your situation is a bit of a gray area or anything like that, please don't just go on something you've read on the internet or a general rule, get some expert advice. And
France deals with tax seasons from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, by the way. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. Janice says, is there an age limit on who may apply for a resident permit?
No, I've actually, well, this
Are
year,
there age limits on any of the visas or?
I think there might be an indirect limit, but I mean, the oldest I've processed so far or dealt with, I should say, yeah, was like 97 years old.
Right.
So
Okay.
I know up to a century. I mean, the problem might become to insure them if they're 100 something years old. So if there are vampires in the audience, might be a bit tricky, but otherwise it should be okay.
Okay, that's good to know. Right, Kathy says, I'm from the US. When applying for a 12-month plus visa, can I use reservations at 2 or 3 B&Bs or hotels to meet the 3-month accommodation requirement?
Okay, so this one is particularly tricky. Technically speaking, Airbnbs. Well, first, if you're coming from the UK, it's going to be a hard no. If you're coming from the US, they are accepting shorter term accommodation because you're further away, so they're trying to be mindful of this. But this is not technically visa compliant, so there's no way we can guarantee. I can tell you what I've seen. I can tell you that there's strengthening the rule, unfortunately. So for now, I mean, this week last week we've seen a few rejections because they only prepaid for 1 or 2 weeks for Airbnb. It was never seen before. Now they want at least 1 month, basically, prepaid.
Okay.
Okay, but it could change tomorrow. So I would say I've at least 1 month prepaid. That should get the job done, but I cannot answer this question for certain. For certain, there's only 3 things that are visa compliant. Like I was saying, a letter from your friend who is happy to you using their address. Sorry, a 1-year rental contract, which does not commit you for 1 year as a tenant, by the way, in France, and a property ownership in France. That's it.
Okay. Okay, so if you really want to be absolutely sure that you're going to meet those 3 pillars, then you really do need to have one of those 3.
No, and they're cracking down. I've heard of some um, visa handholders who were happy, writing those letters to assist people and stuff, and the government has cracked down on some of those. So I mean, they're being mindful of trying to avoid and weed out the cheaters. Even if I'm certain you don't do that to try to cheat the system, but
No, but I understand. Okay, John says, can we talk a little bit more about the application form itself for a long stay visa? He says there's quite a few questions and many of them are loaded. But are there any pitfalls to avoid?
Well, I'd say technically, yes. The main one is you may be contemplating this form in English because obviously it's been translated. And like I was saying, it's French. So obviously they make everything confusing, even in French and even from a French native's perspective. So I can reassure you on that. The problem is I always look at things, the sentences, the information they require. I always look at the French version of the text for a good reason, because I've spotted a lot of
That's a
mistranslations.
very good point. Yeah.
So and that's why it's even more confusing sometimes in English, because again they've translated something that might have been confusing in French already in the first place, so into something in English. So in English. So that's it's not really a trick, because if you don't read French, then there's not much you can do. But this is one thing I do. The second thing is, well, that's the reason why I always say, if you can afford the services of an immigration attorney or expert, it's definitely worth it. Because, for example, just checking 6 to 12 months instead of 12 plus months, then makes the visa non-renewable and you have to go back to your home country. Just one box.
Yes,
and it's
I've heard a lot.
painfully obvious that you're changing completely the type of visa. So yes, this is French, this is paperwork. I'm not playing any kind of fear-mongering card here. It's just to say that yes, France is unfortunately very specific with its wording and paperwork, and it is confusing. For example, those forms, bear in mind that most applicants, like 80+%, would be applying for a short-term visa, and that's the same form they use for short and long terms. So that's why they ask for the proof of address.
Not checking that one box, and you'll end up.
But that's why you have super confusing names or fields, like the proof of address. They're like, proof of address, please provide us with your hotel's address, and hotels aren't compliant for 1 year visa. So you see the kind of confusion, for example.
Yeah, that does sound confusing. Yeah, I second what Fab's saying. I mean, if you can afford to have somebody to help you with it, that obviously is the chosen field. If you can't, I'd say just really take your time with it and make sure you understand
And,
everything.
get in touch with me because, by the way, my advice is for free. Okay. I offer free consultations. I mean, I do offer VIP consultation if you're in a hurry, but I offer free consultations. I'll hook you up with whomever can help you if you want assistance. I don't charge for none of that. Okay. And we've battle tested people. So, well, if you can afford it, I'll help you for free. If you can afford it, then, you'll have an expert to have you back. Yeah.
That sounds good. Right. Okay. Look, I don't know if I can pronounce this properly, but Lubima, I think, she says, or he says, not sure, sorry. If you have a 1-year residency visa, do you have access to French healthcare?
Yes, if it's resident. Well, there's always exemptions, but in theory, yes.
In theory, yeah. In theory, if you're resident in France, you can have
Yes.
that. Okay, I'm gonna just see if I can find some that we haven't answered. What's that one, Alice? Yeah, don't mention, sounds like, sorry guys, there's so many of these questions. Okay, Colin says, can I go to France from the UK in between applying for a visa and the interview for the visa?
It's a very good question. So the theoretical answer is yes. Well, considering you still have some days in your 90 days, every 180 days allowance, practically there might be a roadblock down the way because when you go to that in-person interview, they'll keep the original of your passport.
Right.
So without a passport, you probably won't be able to travel. However, that being said, let's say you've applied, I don't know, let's say you've applied for a visa that's supposed to get started on the 1st of, let's say May, okay, 1st of May 2025. You applied for it. I've done the interview today. They kept my passport, and I get it back. Let's say mid-April. I'm just doing run numbers to do the math easily. Then I have my visa. It's mid-April, but the visa starts on the 1st of May. I can definitely come to France. I'll just be a tourist for the next 10, 15 days, and then it will switch onto the resident visa. Okay.
Right. Okay. Right. It's quite a few people asking about the GHIC card. So I think it would be a good idea to just confirm when
Just
it's
the 6 months.
usable only for the 6-month visa, not for the 12-month, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Max says a bit of clarification on the getting into the French social security system. He says, after 3 months in France, should I apply for the social security system, even though I technically don't contribute to the French social system yet, and are therefore not eligible for benefits? I think it's just a bit confusing.
No, you are eligible. That's why they call it. The process is called PUMA, which means Protection Universelle Maladie. It's universal coverage, by literally. So we believe everyone in France that's a resident should be covered by French healthcare. This is actually considered a right, not something you're eligible for. So obviously there's some exemptions for detached workers and stuff like this, but yes, no, whatever you contribute to the system or not. But that's why, again, we only provide this right, this allowance for those who are potentially taxpayers, even if you're tax exempt, but then you'd be filing taxes. A lot of French are tax exempt. They still have French social security benefits.
Yeah.
The kids, they're not paying taxes. They do have French social security. So, that's the idea in France. You're all eligible for French healthcare if you are filing your taxes in France, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to tell people when you move to France. As we mentioned earlier, there is a bit of a strange timeline for things. That you apply for one thing first, and then another thing, and the tax, so the income tax, the tax return that you will file often won't be till the next year because you will file it the year after. What you like, we'll file this year for last year's earnings, for example. So if you'd moved to France in 2024, you wouldn't file your tax return until this year. But the social security, which some people confuse a bit with taxes, but it's very different, that you would have already got into the system
exactly
the year that you arrive. So it's a bit
basically the French government is trusting you because you have a residency visa. So we're trusting you that you'll get things done eventually. Okay. So and just because Zoe was mentioning timelines, so I know there's going to be a lot on your plate, especially on year one. That's why, for example, we have like a VIP concierge kind of service where it's 150 a month, okay, and we can help you, like basically be with you all the way, through that first year. Say, okay, with helping you with utility bills and say, okay, that's time to apply for healthcare. That's time to apply for the driver license exchange or whatever. Okay, so what I'm saying is we're very happy to help you out. That's part of our job, actually. Most of the time, if we can do it for free, we do it for free. But obviously, we still need to make money as well. So, but yeah.
Okay, right. We're almost out of time, but I'm going to try and squeeze in one more. Okay, Max says, I heard that for renewal of your long stay visa and later for a citizenship application, I have to stay in France permanently. Is there a minimum number of days per year to comply for renewal criteria?
No, again, just remain a tax resident. So we could say 183 days, but again, this definition is not as strict as, theoretically, I mean, if you want to be sure, 183 days, yes. And you need to have consecutively, in France for 5 years to apply for citizenship. If there's a break or a gap, it restarts the counter, unfortunately.
Yeah, and this is definitely so. I mean, I can vouch for this. I've just been through the interview as we were talking about. They will ask you about your travels, how much time you spend out of the country. And that is something that could potentially be a bit of a red flag for them. If you say from the UK, as I am, but I spend a lot of time in the UK and not that much time in France, they might not consider that fully integrated. But that's at the citizenship level. Obviously, I'm not sure it's the same for a visa or... Okay, right. Well, that is all we have time for today. So thank you so much to all of you and for all the many, many questions. I know we haven't got through them all today, but I will make sure we forward them all on to Fab so he can answer them. And if you do want to get in touch with Fab or you have any additional questions, you can email us at webinar@FrenchEntrée.com. If you enjoyed today's webinar, keep an eye out for more French Entree webinars over the coming months. And remember, if you want to discuss your personal situation with one of our French Entree property and relocation advisors, you can also become a French Entree member. And you can find out more about that at FrenchEntrée.com/members. Finally, let us know what you thought of today's webinar and what topics you'd like to see us cover in upcoming webinars. Again, you can drop us an email at webinar@FrenchEntrée.com. Okay. Thank you one more time to everyone. Thank you, Fab.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I'll get in touch afterwards, so you can reach out if you'd like directly with me.
Brilliant.
And thank you for being there. Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.